The following is brought to you by the PLD Projects Network. It's me. It's PLD. PLD. PJ Campbell. Two mediocre white dudes on film. Because frankly, we know you don't have enough of that in your life. So we're here to give you more. And without further ado, here are two mediocre white dudes on film.
It's late. I'm sorry. This is my fault. We're here late at night recording a podcast about H2. It may just be a one-way conversation at this point because it's like 2 a.m. for PLD. And this is my fault because I decided to go see Rock and Roll High School tonight on the big screen. PLD, you're muted. I can't hear you if you have been talking this whole time. There it is.
We're going to start this over.
No, you're leaving it. You're absolutely leaving it. You're absolutely leaving it.
Hello, here we are.
Hi. I was wondering why you were being so quiet. Like at first I thought the bit was funny, and then you kept being quiet, and I was like, wait.
As soon as it went live, I got the note. Looks like your mic came unplugged. I'm like, motherfucker, god damn it. PJ just like hacking me or something. I don't know.
Well, I mean, if you learned anything from the Fantasy Football League this weekend, I do have the power of magic and or voodoo.
You are pretty impressive at this point. The 3-0 guy who has no idea what he's doing. Part of it, you know, a little less than anybody else in the league, but yet you are still in first place and 3-0.
Not just that, I somehow managed to like start a summoning circle within the group that made Chance Ellison lose to me, and somehow kneecapped his player that he needed to perform well in the last game so that I would beat him.
I got to say, I very much am supportive of that because anytime Chance Ellison loses, it's a good day in the PLD household.
I mean, it's a good day in the PJ Campbell household, too, so, you know.
Poor Chance. He actually probably knows more than any of us, and yet I've never seen him do that well in our leagues. He's always done very.
And yet here I am.
Right? Exactly. Here I am, who auto drafts my team. I had no control over my team. I mean, I do some waiver wire picks here and there now, but I'm just like 2-1. I'm still doing pretty good myself. And then there's Chance. Poor Chance.
How am I in first?
I don't know. I have no idea, dude. It's a mystery. I don't know, man. You got the magic touch.
I don't know what it is. I'm the only 3-0 person in the league. It makes no goddamn sense.
I don't want to face you at this point. I'm kind of worried you're going to like all my team's going to like get COVID and like retire or something.
Could you imagine? I mean, my first matchup was against your guys' champion last year who went undefeated, and I whipped his ass.
You did. You did. You whipped America's ass. That's the name of the team.
I whipped America's ass. Sorry, Billy Belford.
Billy Belford, he was our last. That's right. He was a champion last year, and he has not shown up against you. That's for sure. So good for you.
Let's be honest. Sure. I mean, so far at least. Give it time. One of you will finally beat me, and I will feel better. I'm really not loving the streak. I wish I had lost at least once because, like, that first loss, I think I finally know what it feels like for the Schmodown players to be like that when you miss the question, like all the pressure's gone because now you don't have to play perfect. It's fine.
Right. But now you're playing perfect, and you will go perfect for. I think it actually. But look at that story. Look at that story. It would be PJ Campbell goes wire to wire in the first place, knowing absolutely nothing, knowing less than my wife does about fantasy football. I think.
To be fair, I woke up on Sunday and watched football all day.
That's impressive. Actually, that's very impressive.
Yeah, I woke up by 10 a.m. I was downstairs watching football until the end of the game on Sunday night.
Chance must be absolutely stewing around you. He must not be able to hang out with you, like at least for a little bit. So, like Sunday night, would he just walk away from you and not be able to talk?
He didn't believe that I was watching football. Okay, we have a fantasy group chat with all of us who are playing the fantasy football. Wow, we're really talking about fantasy football on a movie podcast. And I legitimately was like, it was in the chat. I was like, I've been watching football all day. I hear his door open, slam shut, and he comes running downstairs because he did not believe that I was downstairs watching football.
Wow. So that made him kind of happy, I guess, briefly at least.
Yeah.
Until he's like, I'm fucking losing to this guy. Motherfucker. God
Yeah,
damn
we watched the game together. It was great. I love watching the light leave his eyes as he realized I was about to beat him in football.
It's unbelievable.
It's like a really beautiful feeling of it's it's like when Michael pins his art to the wall in Halloween.
Yes.
It felt like that. And just like that satisfaction that I felt in that moment because you know what? We're talking about Halloween 2 tonight. Not the 1981 Halloween 2, by the way. We're talking about the 2009 Halloween 2, directed by Rob Zombie. But I just wanted to find a way to, tie this in. I wanted to show that I'm still a nerd. Just because I like sports doesn't mean I'm not a nerd.
Oh, you're definitely a nerd. Yeah, absolutely. That's definitely. Speaking of Halloween, though, I do want to throw this out there. I found out looking at Twitter and stuff today, it seems like we're going to get a new trailer tomorrow.
Wait, really?
That's what I just read. One, I almost don't want one, but I don't think I'd be able to stay away.
I'm not going to watch it.
I don't know if I can. I'm going to think about it. I'll think about it. Whether I actually see it.
Too much away.
It might. Maybe I'll see what people say about it. If somebody says it gives a lot away, then I won't. But if somebody says it's cool, maybe I will. I don't know. I can't decide yet.
You know what it is?
The Halloween Instagram, that's what it was. But Instagram, I guess the Halloween Movies Instagram posted the trailer for the 1970, the original 78 trailer. Right. And then in the comments said, here's the original trailer. Stay tuned for the final trailer tomorrow or something like that. So
you know what it is? That's interesting. That's good marketing, number one.
Yeah, it is.
Part of me wonders if the movie's not tracking as well as they're hoping, coming off of Kills. And so, because it's like late in the game for another trailer. This movie
I was surprised.
2.5 weeks.
Yeah, I was very surprised by that. I know we've had some test screenings that have been, I've read some shitty things about some things. I've read some good things about test screening, but you never know where they come from. You don't know what cut they're seeing. I've heard they've seen different cuts out there. It's very, I don't know, but all I know is that I feel positive in saying that we will at least appreciate it. I don't think we're getting another Halloween Resurrection.
I've liked both the movies that David Gordon Green has done so far. I'm not nearly as high on 2018 as some people. Like, it's a very good movie. Don't get me wrong. That's not me being like, it's bad. As we've talked about, I just prefer H2O's version of the same story. I was
going to say, it's almost like you're kind of biased on it. It's almost like the 2018 is not something you can look at with unbiased eyes in a way. Not that you're not, you know what I mean, though. It's just
but it's totally fair to say, but I'm also admitting to it.
Yeah.
Like, that's the thing is I admit 100%. that I know that H2O is my much preferred version of that story.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't change the fact I've really liked what David Gordon Green has done so far. Kills, obviously, I've been so loudly vocal about how much I love that movie that I can't wait to talk about it. So I don't think Ends is going to be a problem for me.
I think I'm going to enjoy it just fine. As long as it's decent enough, like there's some good kills, we get some good Scary Michael. They've been doing a good job with Scary Michael. Not monster, like zombie monster, not like Rob Zombie versions of monster, but it's still kind of a monster boogeyman kind of thing.
What's funny?
Yeah.
And to your point, spoiler alert, PLD and I both really like H2. That's what I'm going to refer to this movie as, because that was how it was marketed for a lot of its time, was H2. H2 is really fucking good.
It is, guys.
Halloween Ends is, I think that the reception could be similar from things that have been talked about and things I've heard. If it is, I might really love it.
Yeah.
You know why? Because it means it's fucking doing its own thing. And that's good.
Yes. It's actually going to say, like, I'm going to say spoiler or something even. This is like almost blasphemic. Like you said, you preferred Halloween 2018's version, or you preferred H2O rather to Halloween 2018. I don't know if I don't prefer this version of the part after the original Halloween kind of thing. I mean, I know it's tough to match them up because it's a different universe, so to speak. But this version of Laurie Strode is something I really highly enjoy. And we're getting ahead of ourselves. But I mean, it is spoiler. Most people I know hate this movie. A lot of Halloween fans, most Halloween fans will rate Halloween 2007 way above this one. This is like dregs. This is like down. Some people will say this is worse than Resurrection. I don't know who these people are. I don't get that.
They're out of their minds.
But yeah, we are both definitely stepping on a ledge here that very few other people will follow. I think it's a good preview for us on the Halloween Kills episode.
Yeah, and what's funny is coming off of Halloween, the 2007 film, I had like no desire to want to watch this movie. Obviously, I've come around on it a lot more than I had in the past, as we talked about. Like, you and I both gave it a shockingly positive review in like all aspects. Yep. I would say like we were very earnest and very honest, and I felt like it was a really good conversation in a way I was not anticipating, and we rated it the same, which I also was not anticipating.
Yeah, because I was definitely more higher on it than you were in our previous conversations, but both ended up coming to the same conclusions, which I was very happy about. Very happy about.
Me too, which is why I'm super excited to talk about this one, because I really like this movie.
I know. And it's funny how like 2 years later, it's the same basic crew, and yet this just feels much more like a real solid movie that can stand on its own.
And I'll be honest, I think the people that we know and people who don't like it, they've probably never watched the director's cut. Here's the thing. I don't know how much the director's cut ultimately will change their view. But I think the director's cut is a very different movie.
Yes.
In my opinion, because I think it leans in on the zombie of it all.
Yes.
But zombie's at his best when he's unhindered.
Yes. 100%.
To the bigger mythology and doing his own thing. It's why the best parts of Halloween 2007 are the prequel elements.
Yes.
But
100%.
The truth is, unfortunately, I don't know how much the audience agrees with you and I, and that's not just about the zombie film, because this film comes out 2 years later, and that first movie breaks all those records at the end of August. It makes a ton of money. It makes like $80 million at the box office on a $15 million budget alleged. This movie opens and finishes its box office run at $39 million, almost half of what Zombies' first film did. So, number one, it's not super shocking that it didn't get a sequel from the box office standpoint alone. But what's interesting to me is it still turned a profit. It was still made for the same amount of money, went through the worst fucking production hell of all time, and still came out being a pretty fucking good movie, all things being equal.
Yeah. And the 37 or 39 million is nothing. It's still made. It's not bad. I mean, you're talking about how back in the day, Halloween 5 made like 11 million on a 5 million budget.
Right.
Like, it's that kind of thing. Resurrection made about the same amount on the same amount of budget. So it's like, not like it was totally, it shouldn't have been a serious killer. And what it was and it wasn't. There's reasons why it wasn't. But I agree with everything you're saying. And I think the biggest difference between the theatrical version and the director's cut is unhinged Laurie.
Yeah. And the ending.
Laurie. Well, the ending, and that's part of it. The director's cut allows Laurie more room to be unhinged. Like, they kind of like soften it for the theatrical version.
Oh, not just soften, neuter.
That's a better way for it. That's because I was trying to be nice. I shouldn't, because fuck the Weinsteins.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Fuck the Weinsteins. Like, just garbage human beings who are also garbage producers.
Mm-hmm. It's funny that this actually happened, though, because obviously Rob Zombie was famous for not enjoying his time on 2007's Halloween.
Gee, I wonder why.
Right, exactly. But then, like,
if I wasn't subtle enough, guys, the reason is the fucking Weinsteins,
because they wouldn't trust him. They wouldn't trust him. I mean, obviously, this is a tried and true thing to do. It didn't surprise me at all that it was a big hit, because curiosity alone. You have a Halloween franchise which has a built-in fan base. Resurrection was not well received. So when you're rebooting a classic like that, and you're bringing in a director like Rob Zombie, who at least has his own like element of fans, is automatically going to be that curiosity factor. I got to see it. I got to see what this is.
That's why I went.
Else. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was going to go anyway because I'm a Halloween fan.
You and I both,
But the more casual viewers are probably like, well, this is interesting. This isn't different now. We fuck the resurrection. Let's see this and see what this is going to do.
And we have to remember, like, for guys like you and I, or at least I know me, House of a Thousand Corpses was one of the best horror films of the 2000s. Yeah. And it's a film that I revere very much. Right. I know most people like Devil's Rejects more, but like I am such a stan for House of a Thousand Corpses. So coming into this off of House was like so exciting, and coming off Devil's Rejects, because they were both great.
Right. And it was interesting to see how that was going to how those two aesthetics were going to combine and see. But when it happened, it was kind of hindered by the Weinsteins, obviously. And that's why Zombie didn't want to return. But
he famously was like, no, fuck you, never.
But from what I gather, Malek Akkad, who's obviously Mustafa's son, because Mustafa has passed away by this point. Malek, who from everything I've ever read about, Malek is a very good person, solid person, is much more willing. Seems like a good dude. He's even much more open than his father is to letting directors like do their thing. Like I haven't seen many times where Malek has been like, no, we can't do this. It's like he's more likely to say, all right, let's explore. Let's see. That's your vision. Let's see what happens. Yeah. Because he understands that we can always reset it later on if we need to.
Right. And that was his whole thing coming into this one. Because I know exactly where you're going. He told Zombie going into this, I want you to do your thing, because basically what had happened was Zombie said, I'm not going to do this movie. And he ran into one of the producers of the film, and they had been talking, and they had hired two guys. They were a duo. I'm blanking on the duo's name, who were going to direct it. And they were talking about what they were going to do. And Zombie got upset.
Right.
Or more frustrated, maybe. But he was upset because ultimately he's sitting there going, I set up all these thematic elements and I did all this stuff, and you're all just going to throw it out?
Right, and these where he felt ownership over this, because even though he didn't create Michael or Laurie or Loomis or anybody, he did create these versions of them, which is what the basis was still going to be. They weren't rebooting again; they were making a sequel to this film, and Zombie really felt kind of like, if this is going to happen, no matter what, I want to be there to at least try to guide them along. And he said he tricked himself to thinking that, well, this last one was a hit. I showed I can do it. I showed I know what I'm doing. Maybe they'll probably back off now and let me do my thing. Unfortunately, it went the other way around. Weinstein were even more controlling because they wanted to make sure they wanted a repeat of Halloween 2007.
Yeah,
Zombie didn't want that.
And he's talked about that they would show him stuff from the first movie while he was shooting the movie, and he's like, "Yeah, I'm aware. Why are you showing me this? Like, I made this movie. Yeah." Like, I'm not repeating that movie.
Right.
And it's so funny because I was telling Chance earlier when we were on our way to see Rock and Roll High School, I would pay an ungodly amount of money to see the making of documentary about H2.
100%.
That exists, but the Weinsteins have deemed unreleasable because they don't want to look bad. Guys, I can't tell you. You can't look worse than you already do. So
that's very true.
You really should just fucking put it out. But I don't know who has it at this point, but I would pay so much fucking money. Well, right.
They say.
Lost. Quote guys, we're doing lots of air quotes here under the lost of it all. I would pay an ungodly amount of money to watch that, because the truth is I like Zombie. He seems like a good dude. He's the kind of dude I would want to hang out with and grab a beer with.
Yeah,
like
100%.
I think he'd fit in hanging out with you and I.
I absolutely agree.
And I don't love his first Halloween. I like it fine. I rated it above average would be what I would call what I rated his first film. The dude didn't deserve what happened.
No.
And you say what you will about his entire filmography. I'm horribly scared to wake up in the morning and watching this new Monsters film that opens on Netflix in the morning.
Yeah, good luck on that.
I'm literally wearing a Munsters t-shirt right now. I love the Munsters. Like, they're of the two family horror franchises of the Addams Family and the Munsters. I was always a Munsters guy. I loved watching the Munsters growing up. I I have a certain ownership of those characters. Herman Munster is one of my favorite TV characters of all time. He's one of my favorite monster characters of all time.
Which is why I'm scared for
right,
you.
And that's exactly why I'm so, because I know Zombie loves those characters. He's a huge Dracula's literally about Herman's race car. Like, that's the point of that song, and that's great, and that's fine. I'm terrified to watch the movie, but I like Zombie. Like, he seems like a solid dude, and I'm glad he's doing what he wants to do. Right?
Yeah,
like,
yeah, absolutely.
That's what fucking matters.
Absolutely, that's what that's what I'm saying too. He's gotta do what he wants to do, even if it's not to the liking of everybody else. Everybody can hate the film as long as he's doing what he's doing for himself. I can't argue that. I might say I don't like it, but
and that's where I'm at. Right? Like.
Right.
It's cool. It's fine. It is what it is. It sucks and it's frustrating. And if I don't like it, fuck, that really sucks. But hey, I'm glad he's doing what he wants to do, and I'm glad he's taking the swings, which is why I'm glad H2 exists.
Yeah.
Because H2, this is my brilliant segue into this, is that H2, unhindered by literally anything that came before it, makes it arguably one of the better sequels in this entire franchise. I would say easy top of all the sequels that exist, and maybe one of the best movies in the franchise.
Yeah, I do not have any arguments that I would be arguing in that favor as well. Just looking at the ones we've seen before, this is highly enjoyable, and I would watch this again and again. And part of the main reason is that it is zombie-esque. It's definitely more unhinged zombie. He's definitely got the wherewithal to try more things. He wanted to be his vision, like Lex said. He wanted to be his vision. I expressed that vision. But beyond that also, it feels like he took a step out of his world a little bit and more into a Halloween verse to a degree. Because one of the things we didn't like about Halloween 2007, even the prequel stuff, even the origin story, that was it had a lot of that hillbilly zombie stuff that zombie has, the hillbilly horror stuff. And that was not fitting well for us. That's pretty much absent for the most part in H2. Like, you have like the coroners who are kind of like that, and you have, some of Laurie's friends are not, I wouldn't say they're hillbillies, but they're definitely more of that raunch and roll kind of attitude to a degree. But for the most part, this is more based or more focusing on like real emotional stakes of trauma survivors. And it's done well. It's done realistically, I feel like. This is a scary movie, less about the jump scares, less about the kills, and more about like the descent into madness.
Yeah, and I think like the tagline for this movie was "Family is forever," and I think that the interesting thing is that Zombie was like, "Look, I'm tied to one thing, technically two, because he definitely knows that everyone knows this. The original second movie was set in a hospital, and he goes, fuck it, fine, I'm going to do a hospital sequence, but it's all just a dream sequence, just FYI, which...
It's almost like he almost like flipping it off. It's almost like, I'm going to give you what you think you're going to get. Yeah, it's so effective to do that because everyone thought
for 30
that.
minutes.
Right, and you're like, oh, this is like, so he's going to do that. He's going to do Michael in the hospital, just like Halloween 2. Oh, man, here we go again. And also when it's done, you're like, he's like basically saying, no, here's what you think you're going to get. You're not getting that. I'm turning this on your fucking head. And I loved that happened.
You were so right. And I think the other thing that I like about it, not just flipping the bird to the audience, but he goes, look, to your point, Halloween is already scary enough being a Michael story and it's a slasher film, but I want to deal with the trauma of these people, of what they went through. And I think it's a thing that, again, H2O did it. In 2018 did it, but I don't think that the Halloween movies have ever dealt heavily with the trauma of the victims. Like, Halloween 2 tries to, but the thing is it's the night of. We're not picking up with it 2 years later. We're not picking up with it 20 years later. What is the damage of a night like this do to someone's psyche? And what is the ultimate destructive mode that it creates in someone? And I think that that's why I like H2 so much, because H2, in all of its wisdom, if you will, is to make Laurie not just the unwilling victim in all of this, but to take the stuff about being the daughter, or the daughter of the Myers and the sister to Michael, but you kind of don't make it like the focal point like Halloween 2 does. Like, it's a big part of the twist, but ultimately the bigger thing is oh shit, am I actually crazy?
Right.
Like Michael.
Yeah, I mean, I agree 100%. I will just taking it back to the step. You mentioned trauma. I think the Halloween franchise has probably done trauma the best. Definitely the big three. I mean, you had like Friday the 13th, you dealt with trauma a little bit here and there after the first like Friday the 13th part 2, but he gets killed right away. And then you deal with Tommy, who has some trauma, but it's kind of like wishy-washy on it. Nightmare on Elm Street deals with trauma with Heather Langenkamp and Nancy Thompson in part 3, but it's a very surface level. But Halloween has, like you said, H2O, which is better. It's very clinical still, to the point where it's like not ready to dig deep down into it. Still a Michael movie. It's done very well comparatively, but 2018 is really dirty. But this is where Rob Zombie shined, and he says, I want to take this and really delve into it, not just make it like a characteristic of Laurie, make it Laurie's story is this trauma, in a way. It kind of feels like the characteristic of H2O in 2018 is how it affects Laurie and her relationships and how she's going to face Michael. But this is like not about facing Michael in H2. It's barely, he barely really thinks of him that way. I mean, in fact, she has the conversation. She goes, I know he's dead. I shot him in the fucking head.
Which, of course, was cut out of the theatrical cut, mind you.
Right. But she's really deep into what's fucking her up. And that's what makes it such an interesting story.
Well, and not just that, but her relationship with everyone around her, right?
Yes.
Just look about it. Think about the stuff that's going on around her. In this version of the film, one of the things that I'm actually huge on is the fact that we find out that Annie lives. And she's living with Annie and her father, but because of the damage that all this has done, Laurie kind of puts it all on her,
right,
and makes herself the focal point without looking at the fact that Annie also survived this, that Lee survived this, and that starts to create tension where their friendship is falling apart. Like, these two were so close, and I love that about that. I think it's such an interesting dive, and I think that Scout Taylor Compton does not get enough love for how good she is in this, and Danielle Harris does not get enough love for how good she is in this, and Brad Dourif does not get enough love for how good he is in this. The three of them are so great.
I want to interject to say we stand Danielle Harris in this podcast. Obviously, I've said that before, but I agree with you 100. And Brad Dourif is my favorite part of these movies, of the zombie version. But Dourif is phenomenal. We're going to get to it, but his moment to shine in this one is so heart-wrenching and so raw, but so good. I remember hearing some people say it wasn't good acting. I'm like, I don't know who you are, but this is fucking phenomenal acting.
They're the same people who say that Brian O'Halloran and Jeff Anderson aren't acting in Clerks 3, and I want to slap all of them. By the way, Clerks 3 is fucking great. So, you know what? Fuck you.
Exactly.
I'm sorry. That was mean. If you don't like Clerks 3, it's fine. But also fuck.
We're a positive podcast, BJ. We're a positive podcast.
I know. And look, you can think what you want to think, and it's fine. I just want you to know you're wrong, and that's okay. It's okay to be wrong sometimes. Clerks 3 is great.
It is great. Yeah, I will get that.
Beside that, though, we haven't touched on. There's one other person who's really great in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sad to say it's not Sid Haig, who does not make an appearance in this movie, which is very sad. I miss Sid Haig in this. However, Malcolm McDowell's Loomis is so fucking good in this movie because it is such a stark contrast to every version of this character we've ever seen, even more so than his version in the last movie. The Loomis who is benefiting off the deaths of everyone, who has become this egomaniac who decides that he writes a second book about everything that happened and is benefiting on it. In the director's cut 2 years later, in the theatrical cut, for some reason, 1 year later. Again, a weird
who knows
that
why.
makes no sense. Fuck you, Weinsteins. But 2 years later, for the stuff that has happened, and there's actually something very interesting to be said of us exploring a character like Loomis, who is benefiting off the deaths of people in real life tragedies in this universe, to people who benefit off of real life tragedies in real life. Zombie's pretty smart and pointed in what he's trying to do and what he's trying to say in situations like that. But McDowell is so fucking good, and I did not realize he was not signed on until the movie was already shooting.
Yeah, I'm reading that. Yep. That's intense. I don't know what they would have done otherwise.
Recast?
I know, but that's what I'm saying. Like the recast would have been awful. I think I couldn't.
Well, I mean, that was after they lost 2 weeks of their production. Thanks, Weinstein's.
Literally,
the day before they were supposed to start shooting, they were told they were losing 2 weeks of shooting time. Bullshit. And then they were having to come out the same weekend that the first movie did, like 2 years later. What a fucking mess. If Rob Zombie is me, I'm burning the studio to the ground. Rob Zombie's a better person than I am.
You heard it here first. Rob Zombie, better person than PJ Campbell. I somehow doubt that's true, but you are.
It could also be true.
I don't really know Rob Zombie. I can't really
maybe
comment.
If he wanted to come and hang out and drink with us,
Hey, we're open to slide into our Twitter DMs, Rob. We'll hang out with you. We'll have a beer or two with you. We'll discuss this. I will say,
with Rob Zombie. That's all I'm going to say. I'm going to keep saying it. I just want to hang out with Rob Zombie, you guys.
I do too. It'd be a fun person to talk to, fun person to hang out with. To your point about Loomis, I will say it's interesting. It's an interesting note. I remember reading hearing about Zombie saying that he wanted to change what he was doing for Loomis because he felt in his mind that Loomis being the warrior that is hunting down Michael with a gun just seemed like a wrong. This guy's a doctor, not like a sheriff, not like a mercenary, not like that. He's a psychiatrist, so he would be doing that. So his job would be to writing books about that kind of thing. I will say that Loomis is unbearably an arrogant prick at times in this movie. And I will say one of my slight hesitations in this film is I think Zombie goes a bit too far at times with him. I would like to have seen Loomis show some more remorse, because it's obvious that by the end is that we have the redemptive arc with Loomis, and he gets to the point where after all the interviews and he gets ridiculed by Weird Al of all people, which I love having a Weird Al cameo in here,
because him and Chris Hardwick, star of House of a Thousand Corpses. This is not I just want to say we do not stand Chris Hardwick here in any capacity. I understand the problems of Chris Hardwick. I'm more standing the fact that Rob Zombie kept Chris Hardwick from House of a Thousand Corpses in this movie, because I like that Zombie has a stable of actors that he had continued to use, and both Halloween movies have every cast member, it feels like, from House and Devil's Rejects. So it's just, for me, a fun moment.
Yeah, I get that.
So I just wanted to make that noted without anyone burning our podcast to the ground. This is not anything more than I was just happy to see that as a House of a Thousand Corpses fan. Thank you.
Gotcha. That's okay. So he's an unburied. He gets that moment. He's obviously at the very end of it all. After he gets shot down by people, somebody tries to kill him. One of the fathers of the victims pulls a gun on him. He gets
what a good moment, by the way.
Great moment. It's a powerful moment. At the end of it, though, he gets the last straw, this interview with Chris Hardwick and Weird Al's.
Who's the guest?
He goes back to the hotel, and he's like, he had his whole thing like, it's fucking over.
It's fucking over.
It's over. And he has his redemptive arc when he does find out later on that Michael is, after all, alive, despite all his protestations, and he's taken Laurie hostage. That he goes and he tries to help. He tries to do anything he can, knowing what it's going to mean. I love the redemptive arc, and that's what makes it so powerful, because Malcolm McDowell played it so well. I do think sometimes Rob went a little far in his quest to make him need to redeem something, if that makes sense. He just becomes too much of an arrogant prick at times to come back from at times. Malcolm McDowell pulls it off well. I just would like to have seen him pull back a little bit more and show some remorse along the way, just a smidge enough so you could see it when it does happen. Boom, there it is.
I see what you're saying, but I don't want that.
Okay, that's fair.
Because I think if you and I put ourselves, wow, I can talk. If we put ourselves in the shoes of Lee Brackett, I was catching myself on all the S's that I was trying to say, and it was throwing me as I was talking.
Right.
Brackett's whole thing is how much he didn't like Loomis in the first one, and then you double it in the second one.
Right.
That's why I like it. So you put yourself in the shoes of Lee Brackett in that situation, and you have to be him or the people in the town or the father or Lori.
Well, there's some stuff though, like for example, like his treatment of his assistant that just seemed like a little wrong and off. Like,
you know why?
Far.
I hear you. The problem is that for better or worse, that's what happens to a lot of people who end up with money and power, whether they want to or not.
Right.
They throw their morals and who they are out the window.
I mean, obviously, I've talked about how much I like the movie overall, so this is obviously not a cut through of it. My own personal thing, I would have seen something, but I get your vision of it as well.
And I'm not talking. If I'm coming off as I'm talking down to you, that is not what I'm intending. Obviously,
we have disagreement. That's all.
Yeah, I just see it more as I kind of like it because ultimately, I think that Zombie looked at it as this dude came up overnight, basically in success in writing a book about a real life tragedy, and then wasn't. He's like literally anyone in this industry who makes a bunch of money, becomes popular overnight, but that doesn't have the answers for any of the stuff that they're saying. And there's a lot of people who benefit off of people's tragedies who necessarily probably shouldn't be.
Yeah.
And I think that it's like very pointed at that situation, which is why it works.
Right.
Again, for better or worse in some capacity, right?
Right.
But ultimately, at the end of the day, I was kind of cool with it because it felt real enough to me.
Which is definitely, I guess, does fit in with the film, so I will give you that. I guess for me, I wanted to be able to root for him more. And I don't know if that would mean it. I do wonder if that's the Donald Pleasance coming out in me. Like I love Donald Pleasance so much. Like that, you always rooted for him for the most part. A couple things he did were a little off kilter and he was a little unhinged, but you never really saw him as like an asshole, like a complete asshole. Whereas I wanted to root for the redemption angle. I think I would have been perfectly fine with him making money off of that and kind of touring it around and being like pompous about it. I just didn't like the cruelty side that he got into a little bit. But we're nitpicking at this point, honestly, between it. You dug it. That's cool. I didn't hurt the film entirely for me, just slightly.
No, totally. And again, I hear you. Mm-hmm. I respect it. I don't necessarily agree, but I see where you're coming from.
Right.
And ultimately, I think that's kind of the thing with this movie.
Right.
And I think that's everyone's thing with this movie, is that ultimately this movie is very hard for people to put into a box because there's no box to put it in.
Yeah.
Zombie decided to do everything to his own drum. And I know Danielle Harris is not a fan of this movie. She's talked about that. She's openly said that she felt like Zombie didn't have a real vision for the film. And she's openly talked about how she liked that she had a part, but she didn't love the movie. And I think that that's kind of the common theme that goes around a lot with this film. But I think we also need to take into account that, again, Zombie wasn't necessarily wanting to do the film. He got handed a bad production.
Right.
No matter how you cut it. And yet I think he made a pretty fucking good movie out of it.
Yeah.
And that's
absolutely.
the thing that matters at the end of the day, because we both watched the director's cut. I can honestly say I haven't seen the theatrical cut since it was in theaters.
Yeah, I think same, to be honest. Yeah.
But I watched plenty of videos reminding me of the stuff that they had cut out leading into this, which reminded me that the Weinsteins and everyone involved who kept cutting this movie down for no reason really undermined what this movie was going for. Even if you don't like all the thematic stuff, because Sherry Moon Zombie is in the movie throughout. That's not a surprise. She's in every one of his movies. Obviously, they're married. He likes working with his wife, and that's fine. Like, people like to talk shit about stuff like this, but ultimately, at the end of the day, if I was making movies, I would also want to hang out with the people that I actually like, because you know why? It would make making the thing that I'm doing a fucking ton easier.
Yep, I fully agree with that.
Yeah, like everyone gives shit to guys like Adam Sandler who he'll go off and do movies like Grown Ups, and he's hanging out with his friends on a vacation making a movie. Guess what? I too would like to go to Hawaii with my friends and make a fucking movie for 60 days.
Kevin Smith is the same thing.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong ultimately with just hiring the people in your life that you like working with and hanging out with to make things. There's not.
It's better because you know what you're getting. You know what you're getting out of your crew. You don't want to risk the time and energy spent on a film with you working with somebody you have no idea if they're going to gel with you. So go with the ones you want to work with.
Right, 100%. And so I'm always fine with it in these capacities. Did I love that Sherry Moon Zombie was going to play? Seriously? Seriously? Right in the middle of me trying to make a point and you're just going to keep barking? Yes, I know. Someone walked through the house. It must be so horrible that Chance had to go to the bathroom. Anyway, I wasn't super high on the fact that Sherry Moon Zombie was going to play Lily Munster in the Munsters film, but did I expect any less from a Rob Zombie Munsters movie? No. I should have known the moment he signed on. That was exactly who was going to play that character, and I was going to have to deal with it, and that's fine.
Yeah,
but
it's funny. Go ahead. I'm
sorry. I was going to say ultimately, it's totally fine because I like that he wants to work with his stable, and to that point, Jeff Daniel Phillips, who plays Herman Munster, he has 2 roles in this. He plays Howard Boggs and Seymour Coffins. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Seymour Coffins. Funny joke. I understand that. But ultimately, because a Rob Zombie regular, Bill Mosby, was supposed to be one of those characters, and the production stuff was so bad that Bill Mosby quit. Bill Mosby. Anyway.
Yeah.
And of course, Daniel Roebuck as Big Lou. He's in the first film. He comes back in this one. He continues to use the people he likes because he knows how to work with them.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that kind of that shorthand in directing people and working with people is really important.
Absolutely.
It's a thing that you hear about in a lot of productions. Like, we recently heard it just on Nope alone. Jordan Peele wanted to work with people he had worked with before because the shorthand was so easy.
Right. It's much, and that cuts out a lot of the shit, and that's why Zombie does it as well. Think about the production was so shitty on this with the Weinsteins interfering and everything else. It helps having people around who you don't have to explain things to. You can just kind of say, "This is what we're doing," and people know what you're asking for because you've been there for how many years.
And that was what
each other.
100%. And Jordan Peele in Nope, him and Daniel Kaluuya talked about that. Every time Peele would say, "Hey, this is kind of what I'm looking for," he goes, "Don't worry, I know what you're looking for," and he'd go and do it. And it makes an easier production. And I love that. And I love that he had that to work with. Again, almost everyone that he has in this movie in some capacity has kind of worked with him somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
Either coming off of 07 or just working in other things. This is kind of the early days of also seeing someone like Richard Brake appearing in Rob Zombie's films who's become a regular.
Yeah, absolutely.
This movie's actually like a treasure trove and maybe the most interesting for me of all the Rob Zombie movies. This is the most interesting to hone in on other than the Devil's Rejects, where you can definitely see all the different people he's worked with in one place.
That's a very true. You know that better than I do because I'm not as much of a zombie aficionado. I've seen them and I like them. I enjoy them. I just haven't watched them. I watched them once or twice. I haven't watched them in years. I actually do want to go through and go back to House of Thousand Corpses and Devil's Rejects both, and a few other ones I missed along the way. But I do think
you see Through from Hell. Sorry,
I never saw. Never watched that one yet, so I haven't gotten to it.
It's very good.
It's Sid Haig's in it. That's all I got to do. I got to see the final appearance by Sid because I'm a big Sid fan as well. But
yeah. It's very good. It's not nearly as good as the first two, but it's still very good.
Still worth watching is what I've heard.
It's still worth watching, in my opinion. Also, I think I didn't see 31 until recently. Tim Franco really pushed me to watch it because I had not been super high on seeing it. It was the only one that I was like, I don't know, man. And he goes, look, McDowell, Brake, a lot of the people you know from his movies, like they all appear, but it's also maybe Rob Zombie at his most Rob Zombie, which was very interesting. It's really fucking fun.
Okay.
I
I'm gonna have to do a zombie. I'll have to do a zombie watch through at some point because I still like because I've been looking at a bunch of his stuff. I just haven't seen some of the newer ones, so we'll go from there.
Like I said, totally fair.
Bringing back with the
wow, we are just all over the place tonight.
I gotta say, I was looking at this. I have a lot of notes that I wrote. I did write a lot of notes, but like we usually go in like order of the film. We usually kind of go through and like this is what happened to the plot, and we kind of break down stuff. We are totally going on tangents. So eventually, at some point, we're going to have to go through my notes and make sure we didn't miss anything. I think that's what I'll have to do. But I'm enjoying the flow of the conversation anyway. So it's kind of cool this way to do it. It's unique. I'm kind of curious if our listeners will like it or not. We'll see.
I dig
let us
it,
know.
to be honest with you.
I do too. I don't mind the chaos of it. I just want to make sure we don't miss anything. But it's interesting that you bring up. But it's interesting to me to bring up the Sherry Moon Zombie of it all because it feels like some people would argue that he created the whole dream sequence thing just to have his wife in the film. And if he did, I'm okay with it because, quite frankly, I dig the whole subplot of that. I think it's got a lot of thematically charged moments that help you understand Michael a little more and help you eventually get inside Laurie's head a little more. And I think that it works much better with it than it does without it because she's not as much in the theatrical. Like, there's not as much with the White Horse in the theatrical cut. It's more, I think it's more in depth, I believe, in the director's cut. And I enjoy that about it quite a bit.
I'll say this. I am with you. That's the thing I like. I like this stuff with Sherry Moon Zombie in the director's cut. I like the stuff with the White Horse. I like this idea that in a way, Michael is as taunted by his own past and what he became, and the fact that other than Angel, who is Laurie, his mother was the thing that kept him sane.
Yep.
His mother was the one thing, and I really like the stuff with Deborah. I know that's an unpopular opinion, but ultimately for me, I actually kind of liked that.
I do too.
I know that I'm not big on the humanizing of Michael stuff. I've talked about it in the past, but because we're in a different scenario with Michael, because we're picking up a different side of this franchise, that's why it works here for me.
Yeah.
Because we're not constricted to the confines of the rest of it, right?
That's what I argued for a lot. And it's funny you mentioned that now, and I am happy to hear you say that because it's kind of what my argument was partially for 2007 in the first place. I didn't mind the humanizing of him because it was a different take on things. But it's better. It's actually much better done in this film than it is in the first film. I would say that.
And you're right about 07, but the problem is that 07 is still technically, unfortunately, hindered by the fact that it's still trying to be a remake of the original.
100%. That's why.
And so here it works better in a much different way, to your point, because it's not. Right? Like, it's a Rob Zombie Halloween movie.
Correct.
Sure, the first one is too, but it's also half a John Carpenter Halloween film.
Yes.
This is not.
Not at all.
And that's why it makes sense to me. That's why it works. And there's also a lot of stuff dealing with Laurie in therapy that is so interesting. And shout out to fucking Margot Kidder, who is so good in this.
Yes.
Showing up like Carrie Fisher in The Force Awakens.
Yeah.
And I'm not joking. Holy shit. She looks so much like Carrie Fisher. It's so weird to me. I texted you while I was watching it. Like, I know Margot Kidder is in this. I've watched this movie twice this year because I had watched it earlier in the year just to watch it.
Right.
And I was going through like a Rob Zombie phase. I think I talked about that in the last podcast. Like, I was going through all the Rob Zombie stuff, and I started with these. And it's funny because I know Kidder's in this, but holy shit, does she look like Carrie Fisher? She
did. I got the same feeling when I saw it too. Like, they're basically two peas in a pod at that point, really. Rest in peace, both of them, to be honest with you. But
God. Yeah, seriously.
I do love Margot in this. She really seems to like get a hold of a small role and really takes a hold of it and runs with it. And she's very strong, very good person for Scout to bounce off of. I like her in the whole thing. I'm very, very big fan of Margot. One of the best parts about the movie is Margot Kidder in this.
I mean, I think her stuff because her only interactions are ever with Scout as Laurie, and they're so good. And I just find her so humanizing in a way that is so interesting, because the truth is that one of the things that's very cold about that first movie is that I don't find it humanizing. It's just not. Mm-hmm. And I think it's a big part of it is the stuff we've talked about. Like, I don't really gel with the hillbilly stuff. I don't like the way that a lot of the characters talk to each other. I think the teenage girls and like that whole thing in the second half is better, and I think Lee is better in the second half of that movie.
Yeah.
But there's nothing grounding it in any sort of reality. There's no real humanization of the characters. And I know that's a weird thing to say, but the thing I tend to lean towards in a lot of these movies, as we've talked about over time, is that the movies I like the most are the ones where I find some sort of humanity.
Yeah.
And I think the stuff between Margot as Barbara and the stuff with Laurie is so human. And it's so interesting, and it's so dynamic, and it's so good. And I find myself so lost in those moments because there's stuff in that where Laurie is like a step away basically from saying she wishes that Annie never survived it.
It's so harsh to hear. But it's true too. Like, actually, that's one of my favorite parts is when she starts talking about their relationship and how it's like this whole thing where, because you don't understand it at first. You don't understand what's going on. Like, why are you being such a bitch? Like, because at one point Annie has a scene where she's like, I went through this too.
Right.
And you're like, and part of you're like, yeah, damn right. But then when she says that, they have that whole conversation about like, every time I see her, I'm reminded of it. I'm like, okay, that makes more sense now. I get why you're lashing out, because she can't control her emotions at this point. So she's not meaning to be mean. She can't control herself at that point. Maybe her living with Lee Brackett and Annie wasn't a good idea to begin with. But it is what we
That's
are.
a house of trauma that needed a group therapist, not just a single therapist.
And not a single father either at that point. I mean, Lee does it. I mean, that's nothing against the character of Lee Brackett. I think Lee Brackett's he's always trying to do the right thing, and he's a good father overall. I think he's a good person. He's solidly trying to make things work. I think he's just overwhelmed. He's got two traumatized girls teenagers living in this house. And that's tough for any man to deal with by himself in a way. But he does such a great job. I love the sequences with them, like the time to get like the family breakfast together, which again is another time that the theatrical version fucks up by like cutting short. Or like they take a line, it was like something like Annie says, "One day at a time." One day at a time, Laurie.
And then Laurie goes, "One day at a time." Cuts to her walking outside.
And makes it a happier thing. Whereas like the director's cut, it lingers on. She's like, well, I hear one more fucking day at a time. It's a great little moment between Annie and seeing right away where there's issues.
Right. And again, that's why I like this movie so much, right? Like, it feels lived in. It feels real. It feels human.
Yep.
And it's 100%. The thing that I take away the most every time I revisit it is how human the director's cut is. In such a weird way. Like, trauma's real. You go through shit, and you're going to deal with it.
I also love, real quick, the fact that we have two separate experiences of trauma and two different examples of trauma. We have how Laurie's reacting, and we have how Annie's reacting. And Annie, who's in better shape, obviously, than Laurie is, she's obviously processed it a lot better than Laurie did. Maybe because she has her father. Maybe that's part of it. And Jenna Harris is wonderful in this film.
She's so good.
She's mothering to Lee in a way, which is funny, watching her, like, the traumatized girl.
She's frustrated by it.
Yeah, 100%. And she's trying to help Laurie out to a degree, but she's kind of at her wit's end because she is the same age as Laurie and trying to basically be her mother in a way.
Yeah, because there's two really great moments. One of them is kind of what we were talking about, but it's the whole first sequence with them. And like Lee walks in and Annie's making breakfast.
Yep.
And his first thing is, "Did you hear Laurie last night?" And she goes, "Dude, I hear her every night."
Right.
And it was bad. And but then she goes, "Look, don't bring it up to her."
Right.
Like, don't talk about it. When she comes in here, don't say anything.
Right.
And there's a great moment later where they're all sitting down at dinner and Laurie runs off. She goes to throw up in the bathroom. Like, Brackett says something that kind of sets her off. And instead of Brackett going to deal with it, he goes, "Annie, can you go do it?" And she's like, "Really? I always have to."
Yeah.
And
no, not even really. It's more the best part of it. She's not doesn't even say really. The fact that she just literally goes, "Of course I'm going to go, but it's always me."
Right, and that's what I mean. Like, it's her being like that moment of, it's always me.
To your point, though, I want to say, like, the interesting point, so something we didn't talk about yet is the fact that when she throws up, goes up because she has that connection with Michael all of a sudden.
Yeah.
Like, Michael's eating the dog at that point, or something's eating something or other, which is interesting. It's interesting. Very interesting that the Halloween chose to. It's exactly my point. Is that I think Zombie loves the Halloween films too. That's a little tough. There is the psychic connection that he has with Laurie, which is interesting, and I like it. It's not overdone at all. No. It's kind of done mostly subtle. I mean, this scene is a little bit on the head, a little bit, but overall, it's just like, okay, they're connected. Okay, I see this is going to go somewhere. I like this. It's a nice way to see Laurie walking down those stairs into madness, so to speak.
Right. And I mean, throughout the movie, as it continues, like, she starts to see Deborah and seeing this connection. And Deborah's whole thing with Michael is, we want the family to be together.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, the truth is that they both know ultimately that she's not there.
Right.
But the damage is done.
Yeah.
And they're kind of dealing with it in separate ways. Michael's clearly fucking unhinged. And so the only reason he's on this mission to kill Laurie at this point is he thinks it's the only thing that'll put his family back together. And 100%. Laurie, on the other hand, is kind of stuck on the position of, no matter what happens, I have to die in order for Michael to find satisfaction.
And that's a scary thing to be like.
Yeah. It's interesting. It's great.
It is very great.
That's kind of my whole thing with this movie, is that I get so wrapped up in the will you, won't you of all of it, and the way these characters are interacting throughout, that makes it interesting, because the truth is like, there's some great brutality. Michael does a little bit of killing, but this movie is not the Halloween film that a lot of us are used to.
Right.
Because it's not full of blood and gore. I mean, it's there.
Right.
But it's much more human than that.
Yeah, it takes the gore away. It actually feels a lot more like the Carpenter 78 when that it's not a gory film. It's much more based on the horror. Again, we said before, the horror of madness more than the horror of gore. We get some gore. There's some big moments in there. I did want to bring up, kind of like one of the things I'm looking at my notes when we talk about the family together. I will say one thing that hurt this film for me is not something they can control.
The chase.
No, Daig.
Oh, yeah.
The replacing of Daig.
I was going to say Chase Wright.
Oh, Chase. Okay, I think you're talking about yes, the Chase Wright Vanek. So we're at the same thing. Yes, I think you're making some kind of Chase. I'm like, I don't know what Chase you're talking about.
No, I just meant the kid.
Chase Wright Vanek, right? He is so like normal looking and just not intimidating and freaky at all. Like, whereas Daig had such an interesting, unique face that was kind of creepy, so it worked. He just seemed like a normal kid. Like those scenes in the beginning where they open up. Like again, we're going back to the days when he was in therapy with Loomis and everything else, and they show us the white horse for the first time. I'm not a big fan of how that opens, partially because I'm just not a big fan of it. I can't say I'm not a fan of Chase because it's not his fault. It's just that Chase is just too normal.
And there was nothing, unfortunately, Zombie could do because they shot the stuff with Daig.
Right, but he was just too old.
He was too old, and his voice had gotten too deep in the 2 years that it didn't work as a companion film to the first. And he hated doing it. He's admitted it. He said as much. I mean, he used MySpace to tell us all about what happened.
I remember that.
Just to make us all feel real old. He used this he told us about this on MySpace back when MySpace was still popping and hopping and popular.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, I said hopping and popular all in one.
Wow, you're
how old
really...
am I? But it's a bummer because, and this is I don't want to say anything about Chase Vanek. Like, the kid showed up and he did his work and he's fine.
It's fine.
But the problem is that he's not Daig.
Exactly.
That kid Daig was so fucking good.
Right.
And he was one of the highlights
of
07. So it's hard, unfortunately, to look at it any other way than being like, man, that's a bummer.
That's exactly what it is. Kind of like, what this would have been like if we had 07 Daig here, been even more intense and more creepy. I would have loved it. But
had they actually had the proper time and decided that they were going to do this earlier, I think you could have gotten away with it.
Yeah.
But that extra year of time fucking hurt it.
Yeah.
For better or worse.
Motherfuckers. Fucking Weinsteins.
It's a bummer. It is. Because I like the scenes. I like what it's doing. I think that Sherry's actually some of the best acting she's ever done is in those scenes.
Yeah, 100%. She's great in those scenes.
Yeah.
Just wish there was something to bounce off of more. But.
Well, it's not lost on me later in the film when he keeps fucking popping up, they tend to put the mask on him. Like they're hoping that you don't really notice that it's not big. Like, because Michael has visions of Sherry, as we've kind of talked about, but they're also accompanied by the fact that the younger version of him is always there because he sees himself that way.
And it's interesting is that Michael, this film, this is part of the detriment to this film a little bit. I mean, this film is definitely far from perfect. There's definitely some things I'm not a big fan of.
Sure.
Michael, I like Michael seeing the visions and giving us a motivation of why Michael comes back after 2 years because he's looking for Laurie. It makes sense more than
or 1 year if you watch the theatrical.
Right. We're going with 2 years because that's the better version.
I just wanted to make sure that people weren't confused.
Right. Fair enough. There's a couple scenes in here which like just don't. It felt like, all right, we got to see Michael now. We haven't seen Michael in a long enough time. Like the whole Michael versus the farmers and rednecks that play with him, and it's fine. It's not a bad sequence. It's kind of a cool sequence, especially because it has I like the fact that the daughter feels bad for him, and he still kills her anyway because that's fucking Michael Myers for you. And there's a scene, but that one's okay. The one I really don't like is the strip club sequence because it just feels pointless. I get his mother worked at a strip club. I get that's part of the connection, but it just feels like it's like shoved in there to go, okay, we need to see Michael. We haven't seen him in a while.
I don't necessarily disagree with you, but I also don't hate it to the point that you just said. And it was only because it was so tied to something that had happened in the first movie that I was able to give it a tiny pass because of it.
Okay.
I don't think it's great. Don't get me wrong.
I'm not even really anti it. I'm like, why are we doing it? That's all.
No. And again, I think that's absolutely fair. I will never not think it's totally fair. I just think it's one of those things where I look past it and I go, look, ultimately at the end of the day, it's fine because it was kind of set up in the first movie. And it's the only reason I'm able to look past it, as weird as that sounds.
That's fair. That's absolutely fair. I want to bring up one of my favorite bits about this movie. I'm going through my notes. That's why I'm a little haphazard. We didn't really talk about it too much. The idea of Loomis's book revealing that Laurie is Angel and how that's handled. First of all, it's a fucking awesome idea to deal with because like it so pushes Laurie over the edge. It gives Brackett something to really kind of fear and get involved with. It makes Loomis more of an asshole, which is why, again, this is part of the thing. Like that was enough for me. Like that Loomis did this kind of stuff. I didn't need the other asshole stuff with this and everything else. I love this because it makes Loomis need to redeem himself. That alone makes him need to redeem himself at the end. But again, Scout does so good with it, and it sets off that final act so perfectly. It makes everything just kind of start going. That's where the intensity starts pushing in. And I love it all about it from all the angles. Brackett discovering it, Brackett getting pissed at the book, like, fuck.
And trying to stop Laurie from finding out.
Yeah, he's trying to talk. He's like, she's going to find out. I got to talk to her. I got to tell her before. She's got to hear it from me. Where
Instead
Annie
of
hasn't
finding out in the book.
Which is how she does. And he even tries to get Annie involved. Annie doesn't even know. I don't think Annie knows. I don't think she ever was told. So like, she's like, well,
no, but Laurie definitely thinks she was because she's Daddy's little girl.
Yes, exactly. That's a great little moment. I like the fact that it's a vagueness there. Does she know? Does she not know? I don't think she does. Laurie does think she does, though, and it makes much more drama out of it. So I love, again, that one of my favorite little things that Zombie added that makes the whole second or third act really work for me.
Well, and again, I think it's interesting because, in the first Halloween 2, it is Loomis who also is the catalyst of the information, but it's so explanatory in that one. But I like that it's not him telling us, it's Laurie finding out through his book. I think it's funny because I was having this conversation earlier about remakes and doing your own thing, and this idea of like if you take an idea that's already been done in a movie that's a remake, finding ways to subvert those expectations and still pay homage to it and doing it in the same way. And I think this is a perfect example of that.
Right.
I talked about it before in the Longest Yard comparisons in another podcast we've done, and the way that you handle that. This works here for that reason, because you're doing it in a way that is familiar but different in doing the same thing, but in a way that fits this version of the film, this story, and this character.
100%. Love it.
It's so good. It is. And sorry, I'm stepping on what you're saying. I'm just glad you brought it up because, again, I think it's a good move. And I think it's smart. And I think it works.
And that's just why I think it's one of the reasons I think it's such a good sequel. I think it's such a good, phenomenal, like, exposition. Like, it takes the characters somewhere, which a lot of sequels don't do. A lot of the sequels just tend to, like, we're going to put people in Michael's way and let him do his thing, and that's what it is. Now, this is actually taking, like, these characters and giving them something human to really go through before. Not even talking about Michael. Michael's is like not even a big part of this aspect of it. It's more about the trauma you're going through.
And I think that's, again, the best parts of this movie is the personal journey that these characters are all going on and the damage that is done, the way that they feel, the stuff that they've gone through. And again, it just continues to hinder the relationship between Annie and Laurie in such an interesting way, because you have this moment where Dorff is trying to figure out what he's going to do, and he tells one of his deputies to go to the house and watch Annie.
Watch Annie, yep.
And he goes, well, sir, she kicked me in the balls last year. He goes, she can do whatever she wants to you. I just want you to be there in case anything happens, because he knows.
Sit outside with your gun. Sit outside with your gun if you need to. That's it.
Because unlike Loomis, who we really haven't talked about a ton in this, like I said my piece on it, Loomis is the only one pushing the narrative other than Laurie, who is like convinced at one point that Michael is dead.
Right. And Loomis is convinced of it too. Loomis has this moment where he's like, he's fucking dead, people. Last thing, like, I don't need to talk.
He lashes out at the reporters.
Yep. 100%. Last time.
He and Laurie have the same lash out. Her is at her therapist. But Lee Brackett, he's never comfortable with it.
Right.
Because he saw what happened that first night. Not the opening night, the first night.
Yep.
And that first night was traumatizing for him in a different way than everyone else.
And technically speaking, he was even blamed for Michael going missing. So he's like, I can't let this happen. This is like under my watch still.
Yeah, because if it happens again under his watch, then what?
Yeah, we'll see at that point.
And he doesn't want to deal with that. And again, he's already dealt with it with Loomis. The town's already a fucking laughingstock.
Ridiculous. Wow.
God, it's so good. Every character in this is so fucking layered in some capacity. And the more I have their moments. Yeah. And I fall for it more. And it's so funny because, like, one of my favorite things about Laurie in this, too, is that she's trying to live a normal life, but she's not good at it. So she's working at this coffee shop run by a dude named Uncle Meat, who is played by the incomparable Howard Hessman.
Yes.
From literally anyone's favorite, in my opinion, at least, sitcom, WKRP in Cincinnati. All-time great sitcom, by the way. If you've never seen it, you should really check it out. But he's
also from Head of the Class.
Yeah, and Head of the Class. But for me, it'll always be WKRP. I grew up watching that. So it's just funny seeing him in this because it's a Rob Zombie Halloween movie.
It's a bunch of people like that. I got Octavia Spencer in there. You got like Bill Fagerbank's in there, and like random people are like, oh, okay, actually, that's cool.
Right, 100%. Like there's so many of them, and it just works. And again, on top of the normal who's who of the Rob Zombie films.
Right, absolutely. I love that aspect of it. I will say that. Also, I want to throw out there, but the only people who don't really have much of a umption in the film, I'm okay with it, is that Laurie's party girls don't have much beyond
Grant
their...
and man, why am I blanking on the other one?
Yeah.
Trimber.
That's it. Yep, that's it. Both are Laurie's new friends. But even they are well done, given with what the small amount they have to work with. They are, I will say, they go to the party. Laurie goes to the party with everything going on, everything else. There's one thing that I did not like in there. Not even that I didn't like it, but it took me out of the movie. The one that gets killed during sex in the van or whatever, it's very Friday the 13th-esque. I don't know if you noticed that or not. You know the kill I'm talking about. Oh. Right. Yeah. It's just like this is Jason, not Michael. It seems so
to
weird.
Be honest, though, so are Michael's visions.
That's true. You know, yeah, he's the whole mother thing just like that. Yeah.
The whole mother thing is straight up Friday the 13th, similarly.
Maybe that's a nod from zombie. Maybe that's what it's supposed to be. Maybe, I don't know.
It works for me. I hear what you're saying, though.
Yeah.
It's just kind of a funny thing because, to your point, the whole thing kind of feels Friday the 13th-y. Yep. In such an interesting way to me, which is why I've always kind of been maybe drawn to it in that capacity.
Good, because I know you like your Friday the 13th. I mean,
I like my Friday the 13th, and so it's just interesting to me that that's a thing that kind of happens and comes up here. But I think Angela and Bria are both quite good. There's not a lot for them to do,
right? That's what I mean.
You're right. But they give her the friends, right? Because I think the one thing that Zombie was smart in this, Halloween 2's biggest downfall, it was a thing you and I talked about a ton when we were talking about 81s.
Right.
Was that the characters aren't likable and Laurie's alone almost the entire movie.
Yeah, that's very true.
This movie at least gives her people to be around and they're more likable. They're not great, but that's because she's not great. She's surrounding herself with people who she thinks will help bolster her up in a way that she doesn't necessarily feel bolstered up.
Yeah, I agree. Yes, and it's something like you all do because she made it so clear with Margot Kidder, that Annie's a reminder.
Right,
Brackett's a reminder too. These are the people she goes to when she just wants to cut loose and not worry about it, and it's a good thing for them to be there. And it leads to some great moments. Like one of my next favorite parts of the film, well shot by Zombie and well put together tonally, is we get the point where Laurie is downstairs with one of the friends, and obviously Michael's already there. Michael's killed Annie at this point,
right?
But we don't see it. We see it's like a time jump. They're downstairs, but we see Michael having killed Annie earlier. And it's a slow motion with there's a heartbeat. And it's a juxtaposition of what's going on downstairs, what's going on upstairs. And it's so fucking well done. Then, of course, the death of Mia that happens right after that, which is back to normal thing. But it comes up to the point where we're going to bring, because Michael takes Laurie away. And this is where we mentioned it before, but I think it's well worth a mention again. When Brad Dourif comes in to his home and his sheriff is telling him not to go in there, please don't go in there. You don't need to go in there. And he's like, get out of my way. God, he's really mad. Everything else. And he just has that moment. Like, I can't even the heart-wrenching groan that comes out of him. The no. And it's so real, so heart-wrenching, so powerful. And I love the fact, they intersperse that with him with young footage of young Danielle Harris, obviously as Annie. If they got Danielle Harris's home videos or something, and it's very manipulative of the audience and used to do that kind of thing. I think, but it's still very powerful and it works. You know what I mean? I feel so sad I feel sad for Annie. I hate Danielle Harris dead. Seeing Brad Dourif, just the old father breaking down like that, everything that he has been through, he loses his town, he just lost his daughter, he's lost his foster daughter to madness because of something he did. He's just a guilt-ridden, overbeared man, and you can't help but just feel for him, so good.
It's so good. And again, it helps that you have someone like Brad Dourif that is so fucking good.
Yes.
And makes this moment that much better. And that's why I continue to be so impressed by it, because this scene works the best because it's so fucking powerful, because of his performance and the way he deals with it. And again, this was another change.
Yes, it was.
The theatrical version is like almost begging you to feel bad. They put all this music over it, and they take away the way he sounds and what he's saying in the moment. The director's cut does not. There's no music. It's just his reaction. It's his vocals. It's the way he's talking. Dourif fucking nails this, dude.
So fucking good. So good.
And it's one of the standout moments in the movie because, again, Dourif's a fucking good actor.
Yes. He's one of those actors. I'm gonna bring up a name that I bring up very often. I know you know who I'm gonna say, but it's like an Ed Harris for me. He is the reason why the reason why I love Ed Harris so much is exactly that kind of thing. Brad Dourif is in that realm for me. He's just one of those people. He's so solid. You put him in any role in a movie, and automatically, actually, I'll quote the great Dan Murrell said that. He said about Ed Harris, and I'll say it about Brad Dourif. You put them in a movie, it automatically raises your movie a bar because you have such a strong base, even in a small supporting role. You surround yourself with those kind of actors, your film becomes eminently more watchable, not even watchable, because eminently more good and engrossing, because those kind of character actors are the ones who really bring you in, so much so that they're just as important as your lead actor. Sometimes you even more important in some ways. You can have a blank actor kind of leading your role in a way, like not like a person can be a blank face who the audience can kind of like glom into as part as like putting their own vision through him. But you have these supporting actors around you that can be like the flourish of your pitch, of your movie, of your motion picture.
No, seriously. And I think sometimes people also forget Brad Dourif, Academy Award nominated.
Yes. Yes, he is.
The dude is fucking talented.
He's so good.
So anyone who says he can't act, bite me, because he's fucking great, especially here. And, you know, we've kind of danced around all of it. We've been talking a lot about the movie because the truth is that there's not this movie is about the characters and about the damage and about how they interact.
Mm-hmm.
But the third act in particular is very interesting for me. And this is kind of where we're leading to, is that the thing that I like about the third act is that it pushes all the characters in such an interesting direction, especially coming off this moment with Dourif and what happens at the house.
Right.
Because at that point, Michael kidnaps Lori and everyone goes after to find her.
Yep.
Including Loomis, who realizes that this is actually his fault. He's never wanted to take. And it's not all his fault.
No.
But he starts to put it all on himself.
Right. Because he's at his wit's end. He knows all over. He's seeing now what he's done. And I think he just gets to that point where he's got nothing left. So he might as well go back to his roots and be the doctor that he was. He wants to help people. And he knows, he even says it as he gets to the shack. Sheriff, I owe you.
Yeah. And what is Brackett saying? Don't do this. You've done enough damage.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Like, Brackett wants nothing to do with it.
No, he tries to stop him the whole way. He gets pissed off and he actually sneaks through into the shack.
And I gotta say, Zombie really went out of his way to be like, no one will sequelize my Halloween ever again. No matter what, unless it's me in some capacity, no one can sequelize my Halloween films. This is a two and done. And that includes the theatrical to a point. The theatrical is a little less on the nose with everything.
Mm-hmm.
However, Rob Zombie said, fuck them kids and fuck them Halloween sequels and fuck them Weinsteins. I'm killing all three of these characters at the end of this movie. And by that, I mean he kills Michael, Lori, and Loomis within 5 minutes.
And the director's version specifically, because the director's version has that great shot of all of them on the ground.
Oh my god,
it's
so
such a
good.
Great shot. It's the little triangle of terror, so to speak. So good. The theatrical version does try to.
It's a little less on the nose.
Laurie's not really dead at the end of the theatrical version. That's why I look at it.
No, she is. They just don't. They want to leave it open for interpretation.
Right. I mean, I think it's definitively more closed booked in the director's cut. Because I mean, let's jump a little bit forward. Obviously, the ending is we end in some kind of asylum with Laurie on the bed. It's a kind of very Halloween 4 type ending in a way, because all of a sudden you see the mom and the white horse walking up. And you see Laurie waking up, or kind of watching, and she starts smiling like this, like kind of crazy.
She's home with her family.
Yes, exactly. And that's it. In the director's cut, you more interpret that as in like she has died and she's gone home with her family.
You also see her killed in a blaze of gunfire in the same way Michael is. That is straight out of the Devil's Rejects.
Right. But the theatrical version, you don't really see that with her. So it's kind of like you can actually think that she's actually in the asylum. I felt with the theatrical cut when I watched the different ending. I felt like you definitely could say, oh, she survived that, and it's all happening in the asylum now, which unfortunately would leave it open to Halloween 3D, which was banded about for a bit. It was supposed to be a continuation of this before they scrapped it and eventually went with the 2018 Blumhouse version of it.
Yeah, and look, it's so funny because the difference really comes down to once they're in. Michael takes Laurie out into the middle of this field with this shack, as we talked about. Right. That's where Loomis sneaks in, and he has this final confrontation with Michael. In the theatrical version, Michael dies pretty terribly in the house itself, in the shack itself. And it's a pretty fine ending for Michael in that capacity, but it leaves it open for they could find a way to easily bring him back if they wanted to.
Right.
Sure. Fine.
100%. That's what it's going to be with. But he did his thing to do what he wanted to do. And that's the way I respect that. I totally respect that.
But at the same time, the director's cut is so much better because it feels like Zombie going, look, none of these characters can get out of here alive.
Right.
After everything that's happened over the last 2 years, none of these characters can walk out of this alive. And I like that. Because I like that he put his foot down and he goes, no, look, there has to be a finite ending for this. There has to be a finite ending for these characters. We don't always see that. Because, again, we had 8 Halloween sequels, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, 7, technically.
Yeah, so, sequels.
7, well, okay, 6 sequels, not counting Halloween 3.
That's not a good point.
Sequels. So technically 8 sequels. I was right. 9 coming up.
Right.
Right?
Halloween 2, Halloween 4, Halloween 5, Halloween 6, Halloween 7, Halloween 8, Resurrection. Halloween 2007 was number 9. Halloween 2 was number 10. This is if we're not counting Season of the Witch.
No, I'm not counting these ones, though. Because I'm counting these sequels.
Okay, only sequels. So Halloween 2, 4, 5, 6, H2O, Resurrection.
And then the next 3.
Next 3, correct.
So how many is that altogether?
Altogether, including those not... Okay, so all the sequels done. 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and the trilogy. 9.
9. Okay, so I was off by 1. So 9 movies.
Right.
8 currently, 9 comes out in 2 weeks.
Correct.
Okay, great. My point is that, as you can see, and we've talked about this, as Choose Your Own Adventure and as fun as these movies are, Michael and Laurie have never had finite endings, no matter how many times we've tried. We are about to see the 3rd attempt at this. Right?
Yeah.
Halloween 2, H2O, Resurrection, and now, 4 times technically.
Yep.
And you can also argue that 2 is not, but they didn't plan on following up 2.
No, not at all.
So ultimately, this is the 4th time we have tried to do the Laurie and Michael story in a continuity with Jamie Lee Curtis.
Right.
And give it an ending.
Right.
Zombie said, fuck you, I'm doing it in 2. Laurie's not coming back from this. Michael's not coming back from this. And Loomis isn't coming back for this. It's not a happy ending.
Right.
But it's the right ending for these versions of the characters. And I think that's why I like this movie so much. Because the moment that Laurie steps outside with the mask on and she grabs that knife and she's looking at Loomis before she gets shot, it's fucking powerful.
It is very powerful. I completely agree.
Yeah, because you're looking at this girl who has gone through so much shit, and she kind of watched Michael and Loomis in this moment, and she watched everything go down, and Michael throws Loomis out, grabs him, and basically he says one word. What's that word that he says to him? Die.
Die. Yep.
And it's a good moment. It's a good moment.
Is. I was wondering how you thought, what you thought about that, because it's only in the director's cut and everything else. And I know a lot of people have some issues with Michael talking and everything else. But I think, again, this is kind of for me the same thing. I don't know if I want to hear Michael talk in anything else, but in this universe, it felt okay.
Right. And that's why. Because in this universe, in this version, in what we were doing, fine. It works for me. It's a good moment. And Loomis looks shocked.
Yeah.
That's why I like it. Because Loomis never thought he'd hear him talk again.
Right.
He's fucking sat and listened to this kid talk forever. He finally opens his mouth, and the one thing he says is die.
Die. Yep.
Well, 100%. Fuck me.
Exactly.
I mean, if I'm Loomis, I go, I'm in trouble. I mean, obviously, you're already in trouble, but like...
Now I'm really in trouble, yeah.
Now I'm really in trouble, right. It's good. It works. It's good stuff. And, again, then Laurie walks out there, and she takes the hail of gunfire, but there's a moment where you realize she just might have become Michael.
Yeah, which is probably what Halloween 3D would have been about. And in a way, I'm almost sad we didn't get that. I mean, Zombie would have come back, so it wouldn't have been nearly as good.
Right.
But if in my head, I would actually love to have seen a Rob Zombie Halloween 3 without Michael, with Laurie becoming Michael.
Fans would have lost their minds.
Yeah, they would have. They would have hated it. So they probably, all right, I'll even hear about this. I will retroactively let them retcon Michael's death and set Michael Smuggler's away. And you have the Michael on one side and the Laurie on the other, but them both being like killers in a way. I would.
You know what I want?
That happen. What?
I would have watched the shit out of a Halloween 3 where Michael is her subconscious in the same way that Deborah was his.
Yeah, that actually could have been very cool seeing that. That would have been a way you can get Michael without getting Michael, but like still get Laurie being like the main villain of the show. The only question mark would have been like, well, who does Laurie go after at this point? But it could be almost anybody. You could have
fucking set in an asylum.
Yeah, that's true. Would have been a very interesting tale. So yeah, I think it would have been too far off the beaten path for the producers and stuff, and probably for the casual audience too, to be honest with you. But man, what could have been? That could have been a really fucking cool idea, especially if Scout came back to play it. Whew.
I think about that a lot now because she's still so talented, man. And it's so funny because I recently watched something on Shudder and she was the lead in it. She was so fucking good in it.
Really?
And she can act, man.
Oh, I know. She definitely can act.
I know, but like people don't think she can, and she can. The movie's called The Long Night, by the way.
Okay.
I believe it was released in other parts of the world as The Coven.
Yep.
But it's very, very good, and she's very, very good in it. And it's definitely worth checking out. And it just reminded me that she's really talented.
Yeah.
And I think she gets slept on a lot in the pantheon of the like final girls, if you will.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's because the zombie films are not well received overall by the general public. Well, I shouldn't say that, but the genre public, I should say. The general public turned 2007 Halloween into a big hit. So
right, but less so as obviously as you and I both talked about compared to the sequel. But
correct,
it doesn't change the fact that she's very talented.
Yeah, absolutely. I would definitely see more with her, to be honest with you. So I'll check that out.
Honestly, it's another one of those. In a perfect world where we got all these fucking sequels that are doing what they're doing right now, I wouldn't hate a years later sequel where we catch up with Laurie in a mental institution.
Oh man, that'd be great. That would be great.
And seeing what happened to her version. Now, I don't know if that can happen for obvious reason.
Right.
But I don't hate the idea of it.
I mean, maybe Halloween ends. It ends. They might need some kind of reboot. Or you can either reboot it again, which might seem tired. So maybe they will try to do it. I kind of feel like we're going that way because a lot of times we've already done a lot of reboots. We've done a lot of remakes. And it feels like at some point people will be like, well, we've already done so many reboots, so many remakes. I mean, the next step would be to do legacy sequels to the sequels that got thrown aside. Like a legacy sequel to the Halloween 4 and 5 kind of thing. A legacy sequel to Nightmare on Elm Street 3 with more Dream Warrior stuff or whatever. A lot of stuff that has potential to do that. And it will feel unique and it will still draw enough of an audience, I think, that it might be worthwhile exploring. Especially as you get more streaming stuff going on.
Well, I think it's interesting because we both know, obviously, that Danielle Harris has already met with them about doing her own thing.
Right.
So maybe there's a world where we keep going back to it. I know that we've even talked about, like, as a joke, obviously, the idea of she gets one, Rudd gets one, Hartnett gets one. But honestly, I kind of don't hate the idea of doing a bunch of one-offs with these characters and then doing one with Scout Taylor Compton.
I'm all for it. You don't have to convince me.
No, I know I don't, but I'm just saying there's actually not I don't know. There's something there.
I agree there's something there. I'm not sure what, but it's definitely worth it.
I like the idea of it, but ultimately, basically, I know we're kind of spinning our wheels at this point. Yeah. I just want to say, I really fucking like this movie.
I did too. I do too. We've made it through our thing. I really liked it before. I like it more every time I see it. That's what I will say. Because so I'm interested to watch it again at some point because I remember at first I liked Halloween 2007 better the first time I saw them. But now every time I watch it, this just grows and grows because it's so unique, because it's so different. It's such a different take. And just well done. Like we talked about 2007 being a great cast and lackluster material. Now this is when we have a great cast and pretty solid material to work with.
Yeah. And at least it's doing the thing that it needed to do, right?
Right.
Which was be a Rob Zombie movie, man.
Yes. So good. So good.
And
so
it works.
Powerful.
It's so good. This is a good fucking movie. And I know I keep saying it.
Because we have to keep talking because people keep shouting it down. So I don't know. But you know what? Let's see. Let's see where does it rank on it at this point. We do this all the time on a scale of 1 to 11, where because we always turn up to 11 here on PLD Projects. We have to figure out where this ranks. Of course, I will do my usual. Let's let loose what we've talked about so far. We got Halloween 1978 was 11 from me, 11 from PJ. Halloween 2 was 1981, Halloween 2, I should say. 4.5 for me, 5.5 for you. Halloween 3 was 8 for me, 9.5 for you. Halloween 4 was 10 for me, 8 for you. Halloween 5 was a stunning 4 for me, 3 for you. Halloween 6, theatrical cut was a 2 for me, a 5 for you. How dare you? Halloween 6, the producer's cut, a 3.5 for me, a 6.5 for you.
Yeah, how dare you?
How dare you? Halloween H2O was a 9 for me, a 9.5 for you. Halloween Resurrection was a 1.5 for me, a 1 for you. And Halloween 2007 was a 6 for me and a 6 for you.
So I want to revise something real quick.
Okay.
I want to take my Halloween 6 rating down.
Oh, okay. Theatrical and producers both?
No, just what did I have?
You had 5 for theatrical, 6.5 for the producer's cut.
Yeah, I want to move one down to 4.5. That's the theatrical, and I want to move the producer's cut down to a 5.5. So I'm moving it down one because I realized I may have rated it a little too highly. Ultimately,
that's fine.
Because this movie is getting an 8.5 from me. And I couldn't have that one nearly as close, ultimately, in hindsight.
Good It's a good call. I think people are gonna maybe throw things at you.
They probably are, and that's fine. I probably deserve that, but I stand by that.
Well, if they're gonna throw things at you, they're gonna throw things at me. I'm giving this a 9.
Woo! That's rich. That's rich for my money. I almost went there, and I didn't know if I could do it.
I'm gonna go ahead and go balls in on this point, balls deep in it, because I can't help it. I do like this film more and more I see it. This is seriously, for me right now, it is tied with H2O for my second favorite sequel. Still a snip under Halloween 4 for me, and I know that's partially because of nostalgia.
Sure.
But other than that, I'd watch this over almost all the other ones.
Yeah, dude, it's really fucking good. I'm glad that we're within 0.5 of each other, to be honest.
Yeah, we're solid. That's a very solid combination. I see you putting 8.5. I get that too. I don't discourage you for that at all. That's a solid rating for it. I mean, who would have thunk a couple of years ago when we talked about the zombie movies that they would be so high? And that Halloween 2 specifically was going to be this high. I'm excited. I'm happy about it. So
me too. And again, I'm just glad to see that, like, after so long, this movie has been kicked up and down for the last decade and a handful of years. And here we are just enjoying it, man.
Yeah. Loving it. All right, guys, that's going to do it for us this week. I do want to shout out some patrons from patreon.com/PLD Projects. I couldn't do this without you. You keep the lights on. You keep this thing going. Danielle Ramirez, Brandon Buckingham, Brandy Parker, Jeff Alterman, John Lestrina, Kelly W., and the rest of you as well. Come join the fun. We have a great chat going on all the time. We had a hangout the other about a week and a half ago. We're going to have some more hangouts, some more. PJ and I will eventually get back to our bonus episodes as we are figuring things out. We've just been pretty busy, but we will do some more Doctor Who stuff and some more Halloween sequel stuff at some point for sure. But yeah, that. I also pitch the other stuff on our channel at this point. I do Crown Jewels, which is myself going through the Queen catalog. This week's song is Ogre Battle, great Freddie Mercury heavy metal track. You should definitely take a listen out for that. Class Action this week, which you probably already watched, but if you didn't, it should be live right now on PLD Project's YouTube channel. This week we're doing Olympus Has Fallen versus White House Down. That's my show. And PJ is wrong, and it's okay. As we were talking about earlier, you said you're good. It's okay to be wrong, and that's your. Thank you for proving your own point. We got Richard Hart Jarvie and Maddie Gutter, myself tackling that. I don't know how it came about to be, but I'm actually betting that PJ is right. I think that I am the only more Olympus Has Fallen fan than the other two. So Olympus Has Fallen is probably fallen by now, but we'll find out. That's actually funny. I watched Olympus Has Fallen the other day in order to prepare for that, and I couldn't stop myself and ended up watching London Has Fallen and Angel Has Fallen right back to back to back, and it was a lot of fun.
I'll never get over, like, because you guys were having that conversation, and then out of nowhere, Jarvie saw that I had watched Crystal Skull, and he was like, "Explain my
yourself
for it," and I was like, "I don't know what there is to explain. I like Crystal Skull."
I love it. I love that conversation.
It just felt like such a weird thing. He's like, "That's all I needed to hear," and I was like, "This is odd," but okay. Hey, thanks, Jared. Thanks.
But you can find me at Paul_Denuzio on Twitter. Find me producer for Action Industries when I can. We've been very busy there. Of course, Ben Bateman has a new single out, and Andrew Guy has been over in Finland, so hopefully we're doing some stuff more with them as well. And of course, the time you're hearing this, yes, Spectacular. Schmodown Spectacular, Saturday at October 1st. I don't know the time offhand, but it's somewhere out there. We're going to get watching the final episode in Movie Trivia Schmodown History. Myself and PJ read the questions, team question writers, amongst others as well. But treat us nice, treat us kind. We are only human, as PJ has always wanted to say.
I've always said, be nice to the writers. We're only human. That really matters.
Does. PJ, where can the folks find you?
Twitter, Instagram, PJ_Campbell. Hanging out here with you, talking movies once a week. This has kind of become my home. I like hanging out here, but you can find me also at the PJ Campbell Network. I do stuff over there. Chance Ellison and I, last week we did our top 12 Stephen King adaptations. This week we're going to be doing top 12 family horror films because, nice. Season. Ooh, we're having fun over there. But it's a lot of fun just talking, hanging out at the PJ Campbell Network, and like I said, hanging out here. That's it, man. I just like hanging out and talking with you and nerding out deep into the night about movies.
Absolutely. And next week we'll do it again, this time with Halloween 2018. We're almost there. We're almost through. I'm most excited about what we're going to do next and what big series we're going to do next eventually.
We haven't decided. Legitimately, this is not a joke. We have not figured out what we're doing just yet. So
a couple of options in the air we're talking about, but we'll have to make do. And I'm excited either way, because as much as I love Halloween, it'd be nice to move on to a different topic with you, at least for a little bit. So we'll find out. Other than that, though, till next time, guys, stay mediocre.
Stay mediocre.
Never underestimate the power of mediocrity. Take care, guys.
Bye, friends.